I I have so much I'd like to say about everything when it comes to Final Fantasy. You know, there's a lot like there's a lot to say about all this. I mean, I've got a gripe at this point. Like I don't need suggestions because I know the titles of all the uh turn-based RPGs that are out there, and if I wanted to I could actually ask Google what they were, and if I was missing anything. I prefer turn-based combat very strongly. I mean, I just got back from tonight's Dungeons and Dragons game, and it's a very fun system for me. I like to strategize, and kind of urging my divination wizard to use Cloud of Fog on some archers that were basically targeting us and everything, but didn't. Could have webbed and everything, but didn't need it this tonight. It would have been good if it had been actually useful tonight, but it really just wasn't. Ultimately, it didn't come in handy with the battle that we got into tonight. It was just a matter of getting through things, and one after another. Like just I guess being in the right position on the map, basically, uh, for the most part, and attacking from the right angles really was the strategy tonight, and we won. But I think back to like Final Fantasy 15, and like one of the reasons why I don't like this game. I don't think Final Fantasy 15 is like really fixable for me and from my vantage point. Like I don't have very much empathy at all for the people that are bitter and pissed off about Final Fantasy 15 and not getting the DLCs that were patched, because I'm looking at that and I'm looking at all the DLCs that were made for this game, and like what's going through my head is what were people's complaints about Final Fantasy 15 for the most part, but it had one-dimensional characters that were not very fleshed out. You would play the game, and a lot of the exposition dumps would be put on you, like for the story, most of the story taking place somewhere that you weren't for quite a bit of it. Putting you in Noctis's shoes, where a whole bunch of the story is developing in the background where you're not present in it and everything. And these were their complaints. They were like, "Yeah, you have to go watch an anime and everything for all this to see all that other stuff that was going on in the thing." And then there's these DLCs where you need to buy it to understand why certain things happened and everything in the story. But it's like there isn't enough of a story there in the first place to hold up, and to fill in the plot holes with. I mean, most of the actual story was gutted in the transition from verses, and I know this aspect of it. It got trapped in development hell, and then Nomura's original vision got gutted and everything. But Nomura's original vision, oh god, he was inspired by a musical. He wanted to make it, there's so much that uh, just with this damn thing that just it did not sit ultimately well with me about any of it. And when I look at it, I look at, my complaint, like at this point, if I were to summarize like what I think is a salient complaint about Final Fantasy like 15 that differs from the complaints that have been made by other people, maybe this one has been made, but it's been made more by feminists than by men. And usually it isn't a man writing, it's a girl writing about this, about how the series has a woman problem. But like I don't find the idea of the banter and the social bond between Noctis, Prompto, and all these other characters to be appealing. I'll put it like that. Like, you can give me DLCs and flesh these characters out more and let them develop and everything, and they could develop, but I still wouldn't give a shit about any of them. And the reason I feel that way is that, I look at it and I see that the whole hanging over the story is the brotherhood and everything with this one all male cast and everything. I care about Cloud when I'm playing, and watching, let's plays of the game and everything, but I care in that kind of, uh, he's a lot easier to care about because of the feelings that he feels for Aerith and, Tifa and everything, and then how it would make them feel if he were to disappear or he were to get hurt or something were terrible were to happen to him, and you're also kind of playing through his eyes. Uh, I get upset though. I mean, the thing that usually happens whenever I mention that I'd love, Square Enix to return to its roots and create another turn-based, Final Fantasy is just that, people will kind of respond with suggestions of other, turn-based RPGs, and I'm like, I'm aware of them. I know about Octopath Traveler, very very great game. I mean, GOTY. You know, I know about Bravely Default. I know about oh god, like yeah, Xeno, not Saga, but Xeno, Xenoblade. I've been playing the Xenoblade series lately and everything, and good games. I didn't like the way two ended so much. It made me very sad how Pyro ending up disappearing and everything. That was not a fun experience. It was very sad. But it was a good game, and you know, I guess I get that there are bigger things in the cosmic picture of things to worry about, and that it's just a game and all. But I feel kind of robbed, if you know what I mean, and bitter about it because ever since like Kingdom Hearts, you got all these people that have kind of come over and they've been complaining that Final Fantasy is the original was turn based and everything. And I get complaints about convoluted stories and all this other stuff ever since Kingdom Hearts kind of became a thing because and then, the thing that really kills me about all of it is that SC continues to pander to the sentiments of, people that did this, that said these things, that came on blast and complained about the fact that Final Fantasy was turn-based and everything. But if you look at what most of them say about 15, right? They'll say that the action combat wasn't even challenging in this game. They'll say that you can just hold a button down, basically, and let it and directional pad and let it, basically unleash on these people and everything. And that's all you really have to do. It wasn't really particularly challenging to get through and everything. And you hear these complaints about how the battle system isn't implemented the way that action RPGs want it to be. You'll be trying to, point out like I'd like to go back to turn based, and they'd be sitting, there, with all this, and they'd be saying these things, ultimately to you about all of it, and you know, I found I had a blast playing Octopath Traveler 2, by the way. I really did. I got owned by Captain Caldina like 5 times in a row, and then I started researching. I had to go back and research like how other people were doing the fight, and then it was like, oh, hey, unlock Arms Master to deal a bunch of types of damage to her. But that experience was like part of the fun of all of it. It was like going in and trying a boss, putting on the dark ring and everything, and trying to fight her and realizing just how hard her second form happens to be and getting destroyed. Fighting this really hard turn-based combat that was in Octopath Traveler 2 was just great. It was like, wow, I have never like it's been a really long time since I've been faced with this kind of challenge, with turn-based combat. Like I've been having like I've been able to cheese these systems for so long that the prospect of getting my party getting wiped out in one of these games at this point, like that ever happens, that's a huge deal for somebody like me. Like, wow, there's actually a challenge here in the turn-based system for me. Fuck yeah, that's awesome. And I went through it and everything and came out the other side. But this is about Final Fantasy 15 ultimately, and my gripe about it, like, I think the game isn't fixable for me because I don't want what they were trying to sell in the first place. like I should shut up. I should move on with my life and stop complaining about this one game. But I think this is probably probably the last thing I'm gonna say about the whole thing. I don't want the bromance. I don't want the fucking relationship with Noctis and all of his friends and this whole thing. Uh, explain filling in the plot holes and everything that weren't explained in the original will not fix this series for me. Ultimately, if I were to go through the experience of watching all of Kingsglaive, watching the anime and watching all the DLCs, it would not improve my take on this. And I can tell you that already from what I know about the story, because for me, like one of my chief complaints is there's the girls are not a permanent fixture in the party. I like there being a little romance to the Final Fantasy franchise. I like I as the remake of 7 has been a thing, I'm finding it very enjoyable to watch the romance between Cloud and Aerith and Cloud and Tifa all over again, but with voice acting this time around, you know, which has deepened the whole experience for me. I but people will try to basically when you say that it's a when you say that you want a love story, they'll say, well, it's a love story between Noctis and his friends, and it's like that's a cheap substitute, man. It's not it doesn't really make up for it. And then, the in the West, you get this whole problem where people will be like, well, you can mod the female characters back in, but it's just like, oh god damn it. Can I bash my head into the wall? Like, I'm not okay. I'll admit this in case I have female viewers and everything, and to say these things. I do get turned on in that kind of way that we're talking about, like horny, basically sometimes, but that doesn't define my relationship with women. It doesn't. It's not the only thing I want from them. And when I when I play these games, what I'm looking for isn't something nice to stare at. I want there to actually be emotional connection. I want there to be more to it, there to be an intimacy between the characters and the woman, dialogue between them, a social bond between them. Like everything that Noctis had with his male comrades, I want, with a girl that's in the party in this whole thing and as a permanent fixture of the party. I'm a guy, but I feel like I'm male, but the thing is that Final Fantasy's story rides, in it being very well, written in a way that I find engaging, rides pretty heavily on women being part of the story. Like I feel that telling a good story, a good Final Fantasy story, pretty much depends on having women in the party. It's not an optional element of the game and its story. It's not. They're essential components of any Final Fantasy, and them being permanent members of the party is an essential component of it. You take that out, and it just the elementary, like I would say that Final Fantasy 15 is the most elementary, stripped down to the bare bones Final Fantasy that I have ever had the misfortune of sitting through. And it's like you can't fundamentally fix the problem that I have with this by DLC patching it to develop Noctis and these characters more, because basically I don't want to know more about them. I don't want to experience the social bond between the four of them. I don't really want to go through having these characters fleshed out anymore, because that's not what I want. I want completely different characters. I want there not to be just these four. I want to add like a bunch of girls to the party on top of it and everything. And it's like if you want to fix this trash heap, that's what you'd have to do for me. And it's like you can't do that, because that's not what Nomura wanted. It's not consistent with his original vision and everything. And I'm just kind of like, head in my fucking palms and everything in frustration. Like, wow, man. But, the thing is that I get it. It's not a big deal. It's just a fucking game and all. But, I'm having one of my like favorite forms of entertainment taken away from me because a huge crowd of people takes to the internet to screech noisily about how Final Fantasy is not, action combat like Kingdom Hearts was, or or because that's what they want to play. But you listen to what action RPG fans had to say about Final Fantasy 15, you'll find out that they'll be like, "Yeah, no, I just hold the button down and the directional pad, and I can just ram through things with my sword, and win almost every fight in this game. There's no real challenge here to this system. It's not, and when somebody like me will jump on the whole thing on the bandwagon and say I didn't like the combat system in this, I'll say it's because it's turn based, and they'll reply, "You don't get it. That's not the problem I have with it. It's that the action combat wasn't implemented in the way that in the manner that I wanted it to be implemented." And then I'm just kind of heading my hands, like I've had that conversation by this point by now, and it's like dear Square Enix, do you not understand that like these people, you keep trying to pander to them in order to widen the appeal of the Final Fantasy franchise, but those people are never happy. They've had action combat for a while now with Final Fantasy. They've dispensed with the convention of it being a turn-based system now since 13, and uh bruh, like they're not happy. They don't like the action, they don't like the action combat system that exists in it. They like action combat, but they don't like the way Final Fantasy went about it, and it's just like SE continues to try to pander to these people, but these are the kinds of people that are never satisfied. I mean, I liked 9. I walked away from 9 with a deep sense of satisfaction. I walked away from 7 with a sense of satisfaction. I walked away from 6 with a well, I mean, 6 had a bittersweet ending, but I enjoyed it. I didn't walk away from it dissatisfied. But these people, have they ever walked away from one of these games without a complaint, or even if they did have a complaint, it being something where they were like, "Oh no, overall I found it, that it had flaws, but I can overlook them." No, that's not what happens. Like these people will complain bitterly about it, despite that. Like SE, they're never happy with the way that SE goes about implementing the action combat with the series. They're never particularly thrilled with the way that it goes about it. They'll say that they don't find it challenging enough and everything else. They don't find it hard enough for them. Like I have autism, by the way, and my I can drive a car. I can interact my life and get through the world, and do, and am licensed and everything, and I can get on the brakes with reaction times fast enough to not collide with anybody else and everything, and do it in a pretty much functional way and everything. And I just bring this all up, but when I get into some of these video games and everything, and I start playing them, I can't keep up. Okay, like one of the reasons why, like, I don't like when I was playing World of Warcraft, everybody would be like, fight me, fight me, fight me, PvP, PvP, and I'd be rejecting it time after time after time. Well, the reason for all of that was this. I mean, my reaction times are just a few split seconds slower than other human beings. And as a result, when I find myself trying to play a first person shooter, I lose every single time I play. Every single time. That is a skill issue that was just a curse that I'll be permanently afflicted with because of the fact that I am cursed due to my neurotype with a slowed down reaction time. So I look at 14 and I'm like, oh God, this combat system isn't for me because, I do genuinely try to get out of the way of the AoE attacks in this system to make life easy for my healer, but I just keep getting hit no matter how hard I try to rush out of the path of this. And it's not input lag. I mean, I've got, a great connection to the internet. I can't pin it on my technology either. Like, it's just me, you know, being slightly slower than I need to be under this system at reacting to the things that are happening on the battlefield. And so, I went back to giving my money to 11 and everything, and I didn't really move on from it. Basically, I just kind of stuck with it and everything. Even though already sunk like 10,000 hours into it, and when I when I look at the landscape and everything that's happened to the Final Fantasy franchise, I can't help but be and feel this profound sense of loss and disappointment and everything, because I used to have very strong storylines with turn-based combat, and I was happy with the franchise and the way that it was back then. And then these people came in and they were unhappy about everything. They would complain about the convoluted story. They would complain that it wasn't open world enough. They would complain and complain and complain, and these are the people that got hurt. They, it's like the squeaky wheel gets the grease, basically, as I've been told. Well, I'm a squeaky wheel now. I want these people's feelings to be disregarded, and it gets to go back to the basics and become a turn-based system again. If they have to go over to pixel art to do that, fine. I just don't get it. I don't get why every time I bring it up I get a bunch of people that are like, well, you've got all these other turn-based games that you can play if you feel that way. I'm like, yeah, but that's a kind of a consolation price for what's happening. It's like it's just a way of comforting myself that Final Fantasy has been taken from me by these people. You know, it's only a bandage on the wound of having this series basically snatched out from under me by people that want it to be a very different combat system and don't like the convoluted stories, who want a more dumbed down, simplified storyline and everything. And I've been ranting for like nearly 30 minutes about this. Like the clock's gonna run out pretty soon on this whole thing. But anyways, when I've been at this for almost an hour now and everything about the way that I feel about this, and talked about a whole bunch of stuff that was a tangent that wasn't really ultimately related to my sentiments about 15. But I don't feel sorry ultimately for those of you that are upset about the way that 15 ended, and the way that the DLCs that were promised were never announced. I don't, because to be honest with you, I feel that you guys have become enchanted by a game that, even if it did have those DLCs, has a story that is so pathetic and weak ultimately at the end of the day, that Twilight shines next to it, which is really saying something. And I guess I get that there are people that find Final Fantasy 15 to be a blast to play, and more power to them, that the combat system's fun for them and everything. I mean, if you enjoy the combats in that, go ahead. But I mean, if you think the writing in this game was any good, I don't know what's wrong with you and your taste. Like, I want to bully, so in some ways the fans of this thing in a kind of way where it's like, uh are you gay or something? I mean, do you not get ultimately that what's happening here kind of feels like, but that's just a low hanging fruit about it, feeling like a yaoi fan fiction, and everything. But the truth of the matter is that I just don't find it very appealing, and it's not that. I guess some feminist would point out, like, toxic, it's refreshing that this is moving away from toxic masculinity and everything, and we have four guys that are bonding with each other in this whole bandwagon of this game and everything. And I'd be like, yeah, I get that. I get that part of the whole thing, but I just am not interested basically in what the story is here. I mean, I look back at 15 now and I'm just kind of like, I feel like what I need to do is to just pretend 15 never was written or existed, and to write it off entirely. So, like, the fact that they scrapped those DLCs, I'm like, yeah, leave it broken, because you can't fix it. Like, it was already in, like, development hell for, like, 10 fucking years and everything. You know, and now what are you gonna do with it? Like, what how are you gonna fix it? You're gonna flesh the characters that were never very well fleshed out better? Like, what if, uh what if we don't care about those characters? What if we feel like fleshing them out won't fix this? You know? I feel that way. I feel like, I could get to know Noctis and the party in this series better, but I don't want to. You know, that's the thing. I don't want to go through the experience of camaraderie between the four characters in this series. I just don't. It's not appealing ultimately. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm so into women as it is, like so girl crazy that this whole experience not really having any of them in it and it being the sausage party that it is, just it wasn't appealing despite the fact that like I can socially bond with a guy, I can have relationships with them and not constant, and to say nice things about him without constantly having it to be like, yeah, I like you, bro, but no homo. I don't need to no homo all the time. I mean, I think you get it. I think you get I'm attracted only to women. I don't need to constantly be all no homo with you, like yeah, of course, it can be an implicit, part of things. It doesn't need to be stated over again, does it? Like, do I need to constantly do that every time I want to pay my comrade a compliment, about the way that he's been towards me? I mean, if I want to hug him, do I have to be like no homo when I'm hugging him and everything? Like, do you get me? Like, but despite that reality, I'm not interested in this game or doing that. I want something fundamentally different. I mean, maybe I'm a nostalgia tard, that comes from who came from Final Fantasy VII, who came and can't help but see, because of the fact that I've been a long term fan of the Final Fantasy series, the game, but through the lens of the other entries in it, and look back on things and see that the other entries in it had girls that were part of it, that were permanent fixtures in the party, and feel like gypped by the idea, like like basically ripped off by the idea of there being a game that didn't have them in it. That it wasn't a permanent fixture of things. And when men are like, well, there's X2, why can't we have an all? Why can't X2 was all female? Why can't we have an all male? Final Fantasy. It's like there's a very short answer to that, which is fundamentally, I don't want to spend what's in this on that. I don't want to pay for it. And that's really your answer. I don't want that. I mean, if I had known when I went into the experience, if I hadn't gone into watching Let's Plays of like Final Fantasy 15 as blind as I did, I wouldn't have even watched them in the first place. I would have been like, wow, there's a Final Fantasy that I'll never care about at all.